Before Darlington even drops a green flag, Gibbs Racing just launched a legal missile that could reshape the competitive landscape of the entire 2026 season. $8 million. That's what JGR is asking a court to award them, and the team named in that lawsuit is the same one fielding Carson Hocevar this year. When you see what's actually inside those court filings, you'll understand why this isn't just a business dispute. This is a war over the most sensitive competitive intelligence in NASCAR. And a 23-year-old kid who had nothing to do with any of it is suddenly standing in the blast radius. Here's what's actually happening. Gibbs Racing has filed an amended complaint in court seeking over $8 million in damages, targeting their former competition director Chris Gabehart and, critically, Spire Motorsports, the team that just hired him as their chief motorsports officer. The lawsuit alleges that Gabehart executed what JGR's own court filings describe as a brazen scheme to steal the organization's most sensitive competitive information and hand it over to a rival, not just some general knowledge a guy carries in his head when he changes jobs. We're talking specific documented data, car setups and configurations, simulation files, post-race analytics packages, tire management strategies, fuel mileage calculations, pit crew performance metrics. Denny Hamlin, who submitted a statement to the court on behalf of JGR, called this material the crown jewels of our racing operation. That's not a throwaway line. That's a Toyota driver and team co-owner telling a judge that what was allegedly taken represents years of research, development, and competitive refinement that no amount of money can easily replace. The court has already weighed in on one crucial element. A limited temporary restraining order was granted, and the judge ruled that Gabehart can continue working for Spire but cannot perform any duties at Spire that he was doing as JGR's competition director. A broader restraining order, one that would have required Gabehart to resign from Spire entirely, was declined, with the judge describing the broader allegations as speculative, at best, based on the evidence presented at that stage. JGR is also pursuing a preliminary injunction hearing, which means this is far from resolved. If the court ultimately moves further in JGR's direction, Spire could be legally restricted from applying competitive intelligence they may have already integrated into their 2026 operation. And that, right there, is where Carson Hocevar gets pulled into a fight he never started. But that's only half the story. To understand why this lawsuit hits as hard as it does, you have to understand who Chris Gabehart is inside the NASCAR world. This is not some mid-level analyst or entry-level engineer who cycled through JGR on his way to somewhere else. Gabehart spent 13 years at Gibbs Racing. 13 years. His employment ended on November 10, 2025, after what's described in the filings as a dispute with JGR ownership. Gabehart reportedly sought additional authority within the organization, and when those demands were rebuffed, his time there ended. In 13 years at one of the most successful organizations in NASCAR history, a man accumulates an enormous amount of institutional knowledge. He understands how JGR builds cars, how they think about strategy, how they process data, how they manage tires across a 500-mile race, how they calculate fuel windows. That's the context that makes this more than a scorned employee story. This is a competition director, someone operating at the absolute highest level of team management, allegedly walking out the door with a folder literally labeled Spire, containing files JGR says belong to them. According to the court filings, digital evidence shows Gabehart created that folder, not metaphorically. An actual documented folder with that name, containing what JGR alleges are confidential trade secrets. Gabehart's own account is that the folder was created after he received an unsolicited job offer from Spire and was simply using it to evaluate that opportunity. But JGR disputes that characterization entirely. And then there's the surveillance. JGR didn't wait for Gabehart to show up at Spire in a team shirt. In early December 2025, they hired a private investigator, Ryan Simpson of Barefoot Private Investigations, to document Gabehart's movements. On December 2, 2025, that PI watched Gabehart drive directly to the Spire Motorsports facility, where Spire co-owner Jeff Dickerson got into Gabehart's vehicle. The two then drove together to a nearby restaurant and had lunch. That's documented, photographed, and it happened while Gabehart was still, ostensibly, navigating the post-JGR period. The court filings also detail a conversation in which Gabehart told JGR President Dave Alpern that he had not discussed employment with Spire, a representation that JGR alleges was false. And then came the part nobody saw coming. In February of 2026, Spire Motorsports publicly confirmed Gabehart's employment. JGR responded by filing their amended complaint and seeking injunctive relief. The timing of that public confirmation from Spire, coming after months of what JGR characterizes as concealment and misrepresentation, is what escalated this from a quiet legal matter into a full-blown NASCAR industry story, because Spire didn't quietly absorb an employee and keep their heads down. They announced it, and JGR, armed with PI surveillance photos, digital evidence, and Denny Hamlin's court statement, pushed back with everything they had. Now here's where Carson Hocevar enters the picture in a way that is genuinely unfair to him but legally relevant. The research is clear on this point. There is no evidence that Hocevar was directly involved in any alleged data theft. None. It is worth noting that the court, in its expedited discovery ruling, limited discovery to materials in Gabehart's personal possession and denied requests targeting Spire Motorsports as an organization, finding insufficient evidence at that stage that Spire held JGR's confidential data. So the legal exposure for Hocevar personally appears limited based on current rulings, but the broader organizational uncertainty around Spire remains, and that creates noise for a 23-year-old driver who simply wants to go race at Darlington. But the real fallout didn't happen on the track. The post-announcement reaction across NASCAR media and within the paddock has been significant. Denny Hamlin's decision to submit a court statement calling this material the crown jewels of JGR's operation signals how seriously the team's leadership views this. Hamlin is not just a three-time Daytona 500 winner and a driver. He is a co-owner of 23XI Racing. He understands the business of NASCAR at a sophisticated level, and when he chooses to put his name on a court document in a civil lawsuit against a competitor, that means something. JGR's decision to hire a private investigator before the lawsuit was even filed shows this was not a reactive move. They built a case methodically, documented it carefully, and then came in with an amended complaint seeking both financial damages and injunctive relief. The injunction proceedings are arguably more impactful in the short term than the $8 million damages figure. If a court ultimately orders Spire to stop using any information derived from Gabehart's alleged transfers, Spire's competitive preparation process for 2026 comes under legal scrutiny. Every setup decision, every simulation they've run, every strategy call that might draw from the alleged stolen data could be challenged. For an organization like Spire, which operates 3 charters and relies on a technical alliance with Hendrick Motorsports for engines and parts, having a cloud of legal uncertainty over their competitive operations is a significant distraction. And then there's the separate matter of a $50,000 fine reportedly tied to Hocevar and Spire in February of 2026. The research document notes this appears to be a distinct incident from the lawsuit itself, and the exact trigger for that fine has not been publicly confirmed. But the timing, same month the lawsuit goes public, same organization, same driver, adds another layer of noise to what is already a complicated situation for a young driver trying to establish himself in the Cup Series. When you look at how sponsors are watching all of this, the picture gets more complicated still. Monster Energy is reportedly in discussions about a personal endorsement deal with Hocevar for 2026, an arrangement that would put Monster branding on his helmet and suit, rather than as a primary car sponsorship. Some observers within the sport have speculated about whether the JGR legal situation might have collateral effects on that conversation. It is worth noting that any direct connection between the lawsuit and those talks remains speculative. The timing may be coincidental, but in NASCAR, where sponsorship relationships are interconnected with team alliances and manufacturer alignments in complicated ways, the optics of a major brand potentially aligning with a driver whose team is named in an active lawsuit against one of the sport's most powerful organizations is something that gets noticed. And when you look at the standings now, you'll see why this changes everything. From a pure competitive standpoint, Spire Motorsports and Carson Hocevar enter the Darlington weekend carrying a weight that has nothing to do with tire wear rates on the Lady in Black's famous abrasive asphalt. Spire currently holds 3 charters, giving them protected guaranteed entries and the financial stability that comes with charter-based revenue. But the lawsuit puts their competitive preparation for this season under a microscope. The court proceedings are active and ongoing with a preliminary injunction hearing on the calendar. If the court moves further in JGR's direction, Spire could be operating under expanded legal restrictions on how they use their own engineering and data infrastructure for the rest of the season. That's not a hypothetical concern for a mid-tier team. That's a potential competitive handicap imposed by a court order. Hocevar, at 23 years old, is a driver who made the Championship 4 in the NASCAR Truck Series in 2023 and has 5 career Truck Series wins on his resume. He earned his way into a multi-year cup deal at Spire. His career trajectory matters because it gives you a sense of what's at stake here for him personally. He is not a journeyman trying to survive. He is a young driver trying to climb, trying to get a cup win, trying to demonstrate he belongs at the highest level of the sport long term. A lawsuit that pulls organizational attention toward depositions, document productions, and legal strategy rather than race preparation is not what anyone at Spire needs right now. JGR, by contrast, operates from a position of strength in this dispute. They have the evidence, the court's early favorable signals on the limited restraining order, and the financial resources to pursue this litigation through a long process. Their 4-car cup operation, running Denny Hamlin's number 11, Christopher Bell's number 20, Ty Gibbs's number 54, and Chase Briscoe's number 19, continues to prepare for Darlington as if this is a business matter being handled by their legal team, which is exactly what it is for them. The lawsuit does not disrupt their season. It potentially disrupts Spire's. And that sets up what could be the most important race of the season for what it reveals about Spire's actual competitive position. Darlington Raceway is one of the most punishing and demanding tracks on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. The 1.366-mile egg-shaped oval in South Carolina has been called too tough to tame, for good reason. The asphalt is abrasive, tire management is critical across long green flag runs, and pit strategy, particularly fuel mileage management, separates teams that have done the homework from teams that are improvising. It is not lost on anyone familiar with this lawsuit that fuel mileage calculations and tire management strategies are specifically listed among the alleged stolen materials. So when Spire pulls into Darlington and Carson Hocevar straps into the number 77 Chevrolet, every setup decision his team makes, every pit call, every fuel window calculation will be made in the shadow of an active court case, asking whether those decisions are built on legitimately developed knowledge or something else entirely. Watch how Spire performs relative to their historical baseline at this track. Watch whether Hocevar can stay out of trouble on a surface that punishes contact, not just because contact at Darlington costs positions and damages cars, but because any negative incident for Spire right now amplifies the legal and organizational noise around the team. Watch for any pre-race statement from Spire, from Gabehart, or from JGR regarding the status of the injunction proceedings. How the court rules going forward will tell you a great deal about how the rest of this season unfolds for both organizations. There are also pending questions around the Monster Energy personal endorsement talks with Hocevar. If that deal gets confirmed before or during the Darlington weekend, it will be the most visible signal yet that the lawsuit has not scared off major commercial partners from aligning with him. If it goes quiet, that absence will speak just as loudly. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, there is a 23-year-old driver with 5 Truck Series wins on his resume who just wants to run a clean race at one of the hardest tracks in America and let his driving do the talking. The court proceedings are active. The injunction hearing is on the calendar. The Monster Energy talks are unresolved, and Darlington waits for no one, including the legal teams at Gibbs Racing.